Connie Andrews.
All righty. So for everybody who's new on the council, this is a very unusual budget year. This is be my 7th year now on council. And so normally we have a lot more workshops leading up to this. Nothing against our new finance director. And it's COVID. I mean, dude, all is screwing everybody up. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors in play to why this is gone. But I'm concerned. I'm concerned that our budget right now is negative, going, and I know that some of that is based on the fact that we have the money from the Armory building fire, but we can't. I don't want us to budget on that. My concern is budgeting on money that's a one-time thing, because if we budget on money and we hire a whole bunch of people based on the museum money and using that to balance our budget, then what are we going to do when that's gone? And then we have to continue, we don't have a revenue stream to continue to pay everybody, and we have to lay somebody off. So, you know, that's a big concern of mine. You know, I like the fact that we moved the money for the museum, and we did all of that at the last meeting. I think that's a good start for them. I do know that the building was owned by the city, and we had tenants in there, and all of that, you know, that we're not keeping the money strictly to buy a museum, but it's, you know, it's important that we don't count on money that was just a one-time thing. I've gone over the budget some, and probably not as much as I'd like, but you know, but hopefully we can get some good input going around the table. I wish it was brought to us a little more balanced than it was. It usually is, so don't be fooled by that. Usually we have a little better idea, or it's a little closer when we get it, but so that's also a concern. So I kind of don't want to take up too much time now, because I kind of want to hear where everybody else is too, you know, before, you know, I'd be glad to help make some suggestions, but I don't want to be, I want everybody to have input and everybody to have, you know, I will tell you that I do support hiring somebody in the finance department, because I believe hiring that person will give us open hours during lunch, which I believe our citizens really like and really want. And I do believe that department has been underfunded in some ways. We tend to look at some of the other higher profile, you know, departments than the poor finance department. But you know, but all right, I'll digress and sheesh. Okay.
No, thank you. That was really helpful for me, and I'm sure it was for everybody. So next, Councilmember Ellis.
Being a newbie at this, I wish I wasn't so far at the beginning, because no doubt hearing what everyone else has to say is going to help me a lot. But I had several pages of questions that Patricia and department heads were so wonderful at answering. And that helped me understand a number of things. Overall, I'm seeing that our budget is 1.6 million plus in the deficit. And as I read what other cities, especially small cities, have been doing all across the country, they're in the same boat, and they're making use of their reserves as well to cover expenses for 2021. In part, just not knowing how quickly cities can recover. I'm also wanting to keep a good share of those reserves, especially from the Armory fire recovery. um, aside, keep them aside until we have a plan that we come up with as a council and the mayor for how we want to allocate that. But I think if we're dipping into the tune of less than 2 million, I can live with that. It seems like a fairly good budget overall. The departments are getting what they need to keep going, not everything on their wish list. But we're not having to make horrible, huge cuts into the heart of what our city does to provide services. And so that's kind of where I am at this point. I do agree that hiring the part-time person or full-time person to help with the museum collection is a priority for me as well. And that's it for now.
Well, thank you. I'll share with the rest of the council members that that Liz has copied me on. I've been copied on a lot of the correspondence that the questions that Liz has been asking, because if the opportunity arises, we can see. I can helps me see where the themes are that the council wants to explore. But wow, as somebody who has trouble finding time to take a deep dive into the budget, thank you, Councilwoman Ellis, for your deep dive into the budget. It was very fun to watch somebody new to city government and the questions that you had and the professionalism and the answers that you got. It was very interesting. So thank you for that. So next, if I could ask Councilmember Francie, what some of your thoughts are on going into 21.
I'm kind of new to budgets, so I only have one thing that I'm really concerned about. There was an idea pitched by the Public Works Department to invest, I think it's 1/10 of the insurance money, into buying timberlands up the Wishkah around our reservoir. Investing that money into timberlands, we'd eventually see profits from it to reinvest into the museum and other city projects, as well as saving funds, expenses on replacing the filters for our water. Because if I remember right, it's $80,000 a time. I might have a zero off there, but I just wanted to share that's something that I would like to see included.
Thank you. I think, yeah, the water for the filters for the water, I think, are a public works expense. And usually about this time, we kind of get wrapped around the general fund, since the general fund is mostly our cash, and public works is tied to utilities usually. So I think if I remember right, Director Sangder was sharing that the filters for the water are in his budget. And Director Sangder, do you have anything to share? That's not a general fund expense, is it?
I was trying to turn my video, but I can't find it. So anyway, yes, it's not a general fund expense. It's utilities. I think what Joshua was talking about is we have timberland around our watershed that we don't control, and by not controlling it, we also have the vulnerability of it creating a sediment load in our reservoir. And because we can't control how it's logged, and we can't control a lot of things. And the more sediment load that comes down the pipe to our filter plant, the faster those filters wear out. And he was off by a zero. It's $800,000 to replace those filters, and they have to be replaced every 4 or 5 years. So it is a significant amount of money. There is a document put together by our forester, Warren Heiner, who is actually a City of Montesano employee, but I could get that, and it explains the benefits of investing in forest land, and that he's put together. And it is actually a very good document, and it is good for, you know, it shows the benefits of investing in timberlands, and how it typically makes more money on more interest rate than, like, you know, a common bond or something like that. So anyway, we were, it was a long shot. I appreciate Joshua bringing it back up. We think it's a good idea, but absolutely, you know, totally your guys' decision on how you're going to invest that money.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilman Francie. Councilman Gordon, we're anxious to hear your thoughts.
Okay, my biggest thoughts is I agree with Tony, but I do have one issue. I think we need, and you know, we have the ability to spend a little bit of that money to push to get a bond put to get a police and fire station. It's a safety issue. It's something that I would like to see just a small amount of that money from the fire spent to start educating the public, because this is a long-term process. We need a fire station and a police station yesterday, but the issue we have is if we have a study 2 or 3 years, then the plans are drawn. We're looking at 5, 6, 7 years down the road till we get something built, and we cannot afford to wait. So the difference I have with the other people here, I'd like to take a little bit of that Army money and start doing that, to use it to educate our public to get a bond passed. Thank you.
Thank you. I can share that in a conversation this week with Lisa Scott, they have already started interviewing people that are responding to our RFPs about the police and fire station and what it would take. So that behind the scenes, they're continuing to work on that. And hopefully we'll get a report or a recommendation soon on next steps. Next, if I could call on Councilmember Haviland. Is he, did I miss him? Is he not? Oh, he's not here. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't mean to call him out. Don't tell him I did, okay? Councilmember Cashman.
Well, I guess first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of city staff, because there is a ton of work that goes into the budget before we even see presentations or anything like that. So I appreciate all of the thought that went into it. And I know from everyone's presentations that they do, you know, take so much care and thought into what they need and how much does it cost and when is it needed. So I really appreciate that. And I could tell from the presentations, especially that you know, everyone does understand what's going on in their department and is very conscious of the amount of money that is being spent. And with that, I, you know, like Tanya had mentioned, I do have some concerns with the way that the budget is currently balanced right now. I know right now, for me, it's like, it really tugs at my heartstrings to be adding to staff when we have businesses that are closing their doors every single day. And for me, that is so hard for me to swallow. And maybe that's something I need to get more used to, but I just right now, like the thought of it, I can't even think about it right now, because we have businesses that are struggling and people that are struggling too. And so hopefully, you know, as we do add staff, it will be part of the recovery for Aberdeen and getting our unemployment down. But I hope on things like that we can definitely just hold off for a few months on everything that is unnecessary until we get an idea of what is going on in 2020 and what the recovery is going to look like. Because if it doesn't rebound the way that it has, and if we don't, frankly, I feel like we got lucky this year with the revenues coming in, you know, pretty close to where we had planned. And there was some good planning that was done from the forefront. Mayor Shave did a great job with making directives to cut expenses, you know, and be very frugal whenever possible. But I think we need to continue with that mindset as long into 2020 and be 2021, excuse me, and be prepared to pivot and react, you know, how we see things coming in and out.
Thank you. Next, can I call on Councilmember Kennedy?
Good evening. Thank you very much. So yeah, kind of gonna parrot a few things here that have already been said, because I think that they are extremely important. You know, looking at the budget numbers, you know, we need to really be realistic here, and you look at going into 2021 with the mindset of, you know, kind of tightening up the purse strings a little bit. But at the same time, I also understand we need to also keep certain things funded, like public safety, public works, and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I think what, you know, it wouldn't be too off the mark to look at some of this stuff and say, you know, we don't need this for 2021. We need some of this eventually, but probably 2021, do we really need to move forward with, say, like the museum registrar? Is that something we need to try and push forward for 2021? Or is that something that we can put on the sidelines for right now and, you know, just make sure that, you know, we have that in our minds for when things, you know, start getting better, and then we can put that back in. You know, I'm also just looking at kind of the bottom line throughout the years. And, you know, we look at 2019, and that had a really big miscellaneous revenue of like $10 million that didn't happen in the years, you know, on either side and the years coming in. So 2019 looks fantastic. You know, with you know, coming in with a surplus deficit of you know, positive 6 million. That sounds really great. You know, I'm not totally sure what happened there, but then 2020 we see that, you know, deficit of, you know, in the negative 2 million, and then coming in looking at another deficit, which, you know, I don't think we're going to be able to avoid that for 2021. I think it's going to be something that we're going to have to expect, but, you know, also to minimize it as much as possible. As for the insurance settlement, you know, I really think we need to, you know, not look at this as found money and just spend it willy-nilly. I think we need to be really cautious with how we're utilizing it. You know, like I've said before, if we can find ways to invest that, you know, whether it be in the timberlands that, you know, give us better control over our water supply, and even better, it helps save us some money by making sure that, you know, we have better control over the siltation of that dam area. You know, things that are going to save us money are going to help to replenish that and make it more than what it is. So, you know, I think if we supplement our budget with that money, we have to be really super duper careful with what we're supplementing it with.
Thank you. I would just share for the rest of the council that Councilman Kennedy mentioned the $10 million bump. That was an initial upfront payment on the insurance settlement that got moved around a couple of times. And that's one of the things that Director Soul is trying to figure out, follow the paper trail on how that all happened. So that $10 million was an initial payment on the settlement that ultimately got blended into the full 20 something that we got. And yeah, I think that was the one important thing. And the other thing that we're dealing with that maybe most of us know about, but we haven't really talked about, that you alluded to when you look at the bottom line and the numbers, one of the things we're dealing with that is exacerbating our cash position is that one of the supplemental budgets we adopted in the last couple of years did not actually get posted. And so we're now having to deal with 2 years of make a supplemental budget, which is exacerbating our negative cash appearance. So, and that's not anybody's fault. It just, during a transition, it didn't happen. So that's one of the things that's kind of hard to swallow, is that our cash position was artificially healthy for quite a while. And and that's why these workshops are so helpful, because things like this, you know, we don't share as candidly in a formal meeting as we might in a workshop. So, so I think next would be Councilmember Richrod. Anxious to hear your thoughts.
Let's see. Actually, Councilmember Ellis pretty much covered everything that I was thinking about. And also, she and I were talking, I don't know, a week ago or whenever it was. And I got to looking at some of the other cities about the size of Aberdeen. One of the closest ones is Centralia, which has, at least by the census counts, 841 more people than the city of Aberdeen. However, they have a final 21-22 budget of 142.5 million. And here we're working on about 22 million. And I just think that's an interesting contrast. I would sure like to know what it is that they're doing that's requiring that kind of money. It's a little ancillary to what we're doing here, but all in all, it essentially doesn't really bother me to dip into a reserve to cover, especially this next year, assuming that we can put that money back over the following year or 2 years. And I think things with the administration of a vaccine, and hopefully people will do what they're supposed to do socially and wear masks and do it all that protect stuff. But I can see that the city can come back, and that kind of what the reserves are for, is to, you know, when the water gets a little thin, you know, we take out of what we have saved up. But Tawny's right. You don't want to be depending on any of that for more than a one-time deal. And so that's my concern, is to have enough money. And we kind of have this huge pile of money now from the settlement. And it's really tempting to dip our fingers into that to pay off just a few little things here and there. And as Margot always points out, she's worried about it being frittered away, and all of a sudden, well, where did it go? And so I think we're kind of on track. We're not, in the cities I've looked at, we're not nearly in as dire a straits as some places, although as Councilmember Ellis points out, everybody's kind of in the same boat. We're not quite as in as bad a position in our boat. So I don't mind if we need to kind of dip into the reserves to patch things up for a year or two. I'm all for it, as long as we don't make a habit of it.
Thank you. So Councilmember Ross.
Yes, thank you. So I have big concerns about dipping into the insurance money. But one thing that I've been trying to figure out is how much of the money in our big reserve figure is insurance and how much is just city reserves. I'm also very concerned, as Council President Shaw pointed out, is we have some making up to do because items from a previous supplemental budget didn't get posted. And that's really a lot of why we're in such bad shape right now. So I will concede we may need to dip into reserves to clean it up, but I want to be as careful with that as we can be. And I'm really hoping it doesn't have to be any of the insurance money. I've looked at this, and I know people have tried really hard to be conservative, but I think we need to be as careful as we can this next year and see what happens throughout 2021. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Short.
Um, I'm hearing some very familiar things. Like we got to be careful about getting into the reserves and fiddling away the big piles of money and so on. And that's going to be my ongoing concerns. Is it possible, Patricia, to say how much we're pulling out of reserves to balance this budget? Because I know we have to have a balanced budget at the end of the year.
Yes, so I have a worksheet once you guys get done with your questions that I'd like to walk you through. And then I can provide it to you afterwards. Instead of just sending it to you and expecting you to figure it out, I'd rather walk you through it.
Okay.
The one that I sent you, Margot, I've updated some. So yeah, I just think it would be good to walk through that. So I'll get off here until you're done with the rest of your comments.
Okay. And that will tell me how much reserve is left then.
It will tell you my best guess, as
Okay.
Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Ross have alluded to. There were some things that happened in 2019 and 18 that don't give me a very good trail. It's hard to follow backwards when there isn't a trail. So I'm taking the conservative approach and trying to segregate out only the museum and the community center as where we put the money. But in some of the transfers, that multiple transfers money, like Deanne said, or Councilmember Shaw said, it moved around the city. it went into a multitude of funds, and there is really no rhyme or reason that I can tell. I don't know if there were changing thoughts as there were different people in this role, but the money's all there. But I just, I took a conservative approach. So to show you where I think, you know, what I for sure think what was moved for the museum or for the fire to pay for the museum cost, as well as the community center cost because of the fire. Whether or not other funds were intended to be moved when entries were made, there's no trail that says this was insurance money, this was general fund reserve. They were all lumped together for 2 years. So I'm trying to pull them apart, but it's my best guess.
That must be fun.
Not really.
The council is going to be informed when fund balances are altered.
I'm sorry, Deanne, I didn't hear.
I said, going forward, the council is going to be informed when fund balances are altered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Good idea.
One more question. Well, a couple more, but anyhow, how many new hires do we have? I know we went through workshops and listened and so on, but how many new hires are they asking for?
So I'll try and answer that. As I understand it, there was a request for an administrative assistant that the mayor removed. He did not fund that in his proposal. So that currently is not in the numbers that you're looking at. It was proposed to us by the departments, but the mayor did not fund it. There is a new position for a city administrator that was funded last year that the mayor didn't fund. That's not in there anymore. And there is in the public works, in the utilities, they are requesting, they had permission last year to hire an engineer, and they want to continue to have permission to hire an engineer to work with Chris Koski on getting the levy and some of these other large public works projects that we have. And the finance department wants a new employee. And the police and fire departments have some vacancies, but those aren't new positions. But so those are proposed to be funded going forward as well. So did I get them all, Mayor?
No, there was code enforcement that was approved last year that's being added to community service, but it was similar to the engineer. And for the finance department, it's the cashier position that we had in 19 and previously as part-time. 19, it got moved to full-time. And in 2020, when we moved one of our employees into the AP position, it didn't get re-added. So there's a temporary full-time person in that role right now. And So that's why what is going on in finance.
So technically, there's no new positions. Is the
Well, there's
finance,
a new engineer.
the engineer we funded last year in our budget.
Yes.
So we're carrying that over. They didn't hire anybody. The code enforcement officer was in last year's budget. They didn't hire anybody, so it carried over.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's also-
and
it's
the finance department was a position that just didn't get filled. And so for all the new people that are in the meeting, just so you're aware that when we fund or we put somebody in the budget in a new position or we agree to, that doesn't happen on January 1st because they have to go out and find somebody, run ads for somebody, do interviews. I mean, it could be months down the road before somebody gets hired. So essentially you'd prorate whatever we're putting in the budget, that we're not going to spend that full amount because that person isn't going to be hired on day one. We're putting the full amount in there, but just for that clarification. And also for Nathan, the museum, we transferred that money to the museum fund. So now that's in the museum board's control, not ours. So just for clarification. Sorry, I'll shut up now. Sorry, Deanne.
No, I appreciate that because that is one of the things that I was going to talk about. It'd be nice to have more information on. We want to fully fund positions, but what's the reality? Can we close the gap by sharing with the council that, the police chief isn't going to find 5 people by January 1st. He's going to be months trying to fully fund his fully, feel it. It's quite a chunk of change. But Rick is jumping up and down. I see you. Can the director?
I just want to add that the engineering position that was approved last year is 100% utilities money. It is not general fund money. So it doesn't have any effect on your general fund balance that you're trying to correct here.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry I didn't make that clear.
Good, thank you.
So that it gets us, actually, that kind of gets us to the next part of Margot's question was, I did ask Director Soul if she would be prepared to share with the council our cash position. And in particular, given the interest expressed at the last meeting, I wanted to get as good a number as we can get on what happens if we don't touch the insurance settlement until we have a chance to have more talks. What does our cash position look like if we park the insurance proceeds and just draw down available cash? And I think she's prepared to do that.
I am. Let me share my screen. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Now,
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this is a summary sheet I sent you initially when we first started looking at the trying to combine all the funds into one summary statement. We have updated it since I sent this out with a couple of things. So the first one, this was a projected ending cash. We had our final billing for CARES, and when we calculated our projected ending cash for all the funds, we made assumptions based on the expenditures from some of the spreadsheets that we had received as we were going through the CARES stuff, where we thought the CARES money would reside. When we did our final billing, this yellow column, and I'll go down slowly, shows where the cash was underestimated or overestimated. So, and you guys will all get a copy of the spreadsheet at the end just to kind of show you. So as you go down, you'll see all these numbers for adjustments to the beginning cash. And I can explain any of them if you have questions.
So the yellow column is strictly
Reallocating.
tied to the CARES,
Yep.
CARES money.
It's reallocating how much money we billed and where it was spent out of and where the revenue is going to go into when it arrives. And this is the difference. We have 759,600, I believe, is the total. But of that total, we had already estimated that money into the beginning, this projected cash.
Okay.
So this is the way it was billed differently than we initially assumed when we were trying to come up with what our beginning cash would be. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Any
Can I
questions?
ask a question? Yeah, I do have
Yeah.
a question.
Please.
So when it says like homeless, that like Parks Fund says that it's positive 71,000,
So we
but then
billed,
homeless response is negative 99,000.
right. So when we billed out the actual vouchers and expenses that came through, we estimated that we would bill $71,000 less for parks and $99,534 more for homeless response. And that was due to, we estimated from the beginning of March when we were trying to calculate the beginning cash, but it actually had to start, I believe Stacy can answer this, like April 1st or May before we could start counting the expenses that we were paying, as well as some of the expenses like parking. I don't believe Stacy removed those because she didn't believe that was an allowable expense for CARES. So it removed how much cash we thought was coming back from CARES.
So there's $100,000 that we didn't bill to CARES, or we didn't get back that we were planning on it.
Well, what I assumed so I made an assumption for projected cash based on what I saw in the financial or in the CARES spreadsheet. And I had staff and I looked down and figured out, okay, let's figure out through the end of November what we think is going to be spent out of this fund based on previous months. And so we counted parking. We went back to March, which is wasn't allowable for the homeless camp. I think it was May or April. Again, Stacy knows that date. And so our estimates of what we collect from CARES for our beginning cash balance was off by the 99,000.
So on your spreadsheet, you have park fund, and then you have 71,200.
Right.
And then you have projected ending cash 148, but then the supplemental is 184.
And that's due to the cost in parks that go over. That gets parks at the end of the year to zero cash based on the estimated revenues and the estimated expenses. And again, the estimations may be high for expenses. If COVID continues in parks, there might not be events and things like that, or some of the things that they cut this year because of COVID. But the estimates are based on what Stacy estimated through for 2021 and the revenues that we estimated would need to be there to cover it. So the 184 is to get it out of the negative.
So we should be reading that right to left instead of left to right?
Well, actually, you should start on the left because we have to start where our cash was estimated for where we started our budget estimations. Then we need to see CARES is a revenue stream. So we need to make sure that I wanted you to see how that allocation differed than what we initially estimated, so we could get a more true picture of where cash was going to end. And so this projected ending cash is with CARES as well as some other things. So let's finish with CARES. Do you have any other questions on that before I move on?
No, I've done accounting for, this is just a weird way to read. It's just a weird way to read a spreadsheet. I was just trying to follow up.
So you like to start at the end and go to the beginning. I do that on books, so I get that.
So if I'm reading it right, the proposed supplemental budget includes a CARES allocation that covers up the red ink.
A little bit. It takes away
Some of it.
negative 219, but you're still in the negative at 148 in the negative. So if you go down here to the orange highlighted areas, which you'll all see on your spreadsheet, this is some budget, and you'll also have these explanations over here. So under the orange, we had a transfer of 200,000 out to our fire and pension fund. When we were estimating cash, we assumed that transfer had happened. It hadn't. So we're doing the transfer now in December, and that will clean up that, but it changes the beginning fund balance. So just every one of the oranges have an explanation. The museum fund is another one. So we have the supplemental budget that was approved. How much you wanted to put in the supplemental budget was approved at last council meeting. as well as increasing the expenses to 202,300. So those things affect the ending cash balance. And over here in the explanation, transfer in and budget change per council 12/9 of 20. So that's kind of how the spreadsheet reads. So then when we get to the projected ending cash, my recommendation, and then the mayor changed it some with his mayor's budget, was to adjust these numbers. So to cover the overage in general fund, it's $1,643,568. And without that transfer, the fund balance at the end of the year would be $1,650,579, which is under the 2 months recommended that you should have in your budget in reserves for 2 months worth of your expenditures, which is 16.66%. So I applied it to that. It's 3 million, I don't have the exact number, but so the 32 is right within that 2 months of reserve. But again, that's a choice council can make. So let's go to the question that Councilmember Short had, as well as Councilmember Shaw and Ross. So what I did is I took the 21,462,000 is the insurance proceeds less the transfer that happened in 19. 350 went to the community service center, and 960. I don't have that number. I think it's 938 or 963,000 went to the museum to cover costs that were incurred in 2019. So when you reduce that, this is the number that's left of the fire proceeds, without counting anything else in 19 that may or may not have occurred. So that's why I'm saying it's conservative. There was a $3.5 million transfer in either 19 or 18. And like I said, part of it was the 900 and some thousand for the museum, and then the 350 for the community center. More of it could have been associated with the insurance, because there's no definition, no information as to what kind of funds he used. It just came out of general fund. And prior to doing this, everything was lumped together. So anyway,
we'll have to look. I'm not sure all of that 900 was museum. Some of it was expenses related to shoring up the armory, etc.
No, I'm talking the museum. There were 900, there were more, there was actually more than that in expenses in the museum. And so that 900,000 that was moved covered costs that were, and it went directly into the museum. So those were costs that were associated with the fire, I believe. When I look back, that's where those numbers came from, at least from what I could tell. So does that break apart the cash versus insurance to your satisfaction at this point? Any questions on that?
It still seems to show that we're going to balance the budget with a deduction from the fire insurance. I was interested in looking to see what does this look like if we don't deduct it out of the fire insurance.
Okay, so
That's what I wanted to see as well.
For general fund only, or leaving these funds in the negative that are sitting in the negative at the end of the year? So if we go to the bottom of the spreadsheet, I have a breakout here of down here at the bottom. If we remove the transfers, we're asking to move $2,313,000 or $2,313,000 from the insurance proceeds to cover general fund as well as the other negatives. So let's go through those negatives. General fund is this $1.6 million. We also have a parks fund negative balance of 184. Homeless response, 76,695. And this is for them through April of 2021, with the assumption that the camp will be able to be closed at that point. The museum fund, again, is the 991,151. Community center, our cost of the assessor and some other costs like heat and other things after the fire that need to be covered. That's 185,958. These two funds, the fire fund and the grant fund, are both closing into general fund. They're both done. The fire bond is done. The abatement fund is 257,965 negative balance. And then the public building fund is the IT project, which is all of the IT cost going into the public building fund in the past, as well as 2021, just putting the payment for the Dell computers 5-year payment, which is 150 some thousand. That covers that. So that's where we get to our negative 3 million up here, 3,490,109. And so if we take out the general fund, it puts general fund down at 1,650,579. And then, like I said, the other ones are in the negative. So that was the plan, to clean that up and to give us positive balances in 2021 and a year to be able to figure out efficiencies and ways to cut or adjust our services or our projects or other things, that putting all the department heads together and figuring out best practice. Deanne actually alluded to the fact that most of the new positions that are going to be hired for police, public safety, museum, all the other positions that are going to go in probably won't happen in January. We budgeted conservatively as if they were hired in January, because once it's authorized, there is the ability, if something happened, they could hire them, laterals, whatever. So the odds are the expenses in those categories will reduce. Some other big items that are in our budget that weren't in the previous budgets are, we had some unions finalized. It increased some cost in public safety and in the other unions with some different types of pay and different ways to pay for things. We have a loan that we from the general fund from industrial water to pay for the fire trucks. We also have the loan, like I said, for the IT services. So anyway, so this is that. And then when you go over to this final, so it shows the beginning cash after, if we chose to do the supplemental budget, revenues, expenditures, and then ending cash balance. And then that all gets put together into this final column, which is what is on your ordinance with any of the changes that you guys directed me to make and the ones that we found. This would then be on your ordinance showing you by fund what is going to be budgeted. So if you have questions, I'm ready to answer them. More.
I have one question. So the original proposed supplemental that I have a copy of from a few weeks ago shows us using $2.8 million from the fire fund. And now you're proposing almost 3.5.
That's actually due to an action by you as council. 991,000 was not in the original proposal to be transferred into the museum.
Okay, but that's technically museum funds that we transferred.
Right, but it increases the transfer out of the fire insurance.
Okay.
So if we use cash reserves and not insurance to balance the budget, we still would have a proposed supplemental budget for the insurance portion of about $900,000, Deborah, because of that action we took last week.
Right. And then we also need to close out the community center. That is a cost that has to do with the fire insurance we also received. The other part is if we then expect general fund to pay all the negative balances, general fund will be in the negative. If all we're doing is taking out the transfer for general fund only, that's when it puts general fund at 1.6 million.
That's where I think where the disconnect is a little bit from what we're trying to get, is that if we had never ever received insurance money this year, where would we be?
Okay.
That is really, I think, what a lot of us are asking.
Okay, so where we would be without insurance money is this projected cash balance right there of 3,294,000. And then as you go down this column before the proposed supplemental, we'll be in the hole in parks, we'll be in the hole in the homeless response, museum fund will be in the hole, the community center would be in the hole, abatement fund would be in the hole, public buildings, and hold on. And then capital improvement fund, that gets REAP money, so it will balance itself out by the end of the year, by the beginning of the year. So yeah, so that's where we would be. This column here, projected ending cash, is where we would be if you
Right.
took this column out.
So the current expense fund, that's what we have in reserves? That's what we're asking.
Yes, that is what's sitting in reserves based on my estimation. It could be more if we said insurance funds were used for stuff in the previous supplemental budgets, or it could be, this is the least amount that it could be.
So we have projected ending cash, and we have a proposed budget that exceeds expected revenue by 2.8 million, and then plus all this red ink in this column to account for.
It doesn't exceed the budget by 2.8 million. It
Oh.
exceeds the budget by 1.6 million. So general fund is 1.6 million. Revenues are less than expenditures.
I thought the supplemental budget cleans up 2020. The
No.
proposed budget for 21 looks like it's a couple million out, almost 2 million out.
It's cleaning up 2020 and it's getting us cash available for 2021's beginning cash. So for funds that are in the hole that have money budgeted in them, they actually need more than clean up the negative. They need enough to cover the extra, like Parks is budgeting over revenues. We've got the homeless response that may or may not zero out with what we're transferring in, depending on how long the camp needs to be open. Hold on.
And this is Stacy. So just take that 3.3 million, subtract the 1.6 million and subtract the supplemental. That gives you the balance.
It's 1.6 million is what the ending balance would be.
So the question, so one of my thoughts, I'll just share my thought with the council, is the insurance settlement is cash. And I'm hearing a council that wants to continue to think of that as a whole number, not something that we're borrowing from at this point if we don't have to. And the bottom line is, if something happens, we can make a transfer. I think that, for it's cleaner. I think it might be cleaner to, if we're going to have 1.6 million, that sounds like that's a month of reserves, and we would know if we needed to put more money in there. I'm thinking that we maybe I'm leaning toward keeping the insurance number as a whole number that we're not touching until we have a chance to come up with more of a laundry list of things that we might use it on, and draw down those reserves. But we have to adopt a budget, but nothing says, at least I don't think there's nothing that says we can't adopt a budget with some caveats, which one of them being that given how we're in a pandemic, that we refer this to the finance committee in January to come up with some more cost efficiencies and a closer approximation of what this might really look like. And some of these positions, when would they be filled? Put them on hold until we have a chance to look at what are they really going to cost. And get a better number out of, I was talking to the chief, it could be a couple $100,000 that is budgeted in his department that he won't be spending. And how can we account for that on the side so we get a better actual look in real time going forward? I think that it's hard when there's 12 of us to try and get into the weeds and go line item by line item, but we do have a finance committee that could work really closely with our finance director and whatever departments to come in and talk to the committee and really look at this, because that's the budget the mayor gave us. The mayor gave us a budget that he said he urged us to close the gap, and so I'm willing to do the work, but we can't do the work with just a couple meetings left. So I'm I've heard several council members say they're comfortable using some reserves one time. I think I'm comfortable using reserves, but not the insurance reserves unless we are actually going to run out of reserves and that money is there and we can put it over there. And then charge our standing committee, the finance committee, to really look at how we can close that gap a little bit.
Can I make one final comment?
Sure.
If we set a budget with negative balances in funds, that's against what the code says you're supposed to do. So
Well, that was my next question.
Yeah.
If
I'm
we,
not sure why that was brought to us that way then, you know, I mean, I thought
that was the way it was in 19. And so we're probably going to get, we could get a finding on that you're supposed to have your funds need to be budgeted fully so they're not in the negative. So
isn't that what the supplemental budget does? It cleans that up.
that's what and you're saying you want to wait till 2021 to clean it up. But if we pass a budget with negatives, that could be a finding is all
No, I
I'm
don't
saying.
think that's what I said. I said, I think we should adopt the budget and draw down reserves to get it, you know, where it's supposed to be. And that would leave us with 1.6 million. And
No, just in general fund, not the negatives in the other funds. That would drop to a negative number.
And there's not enough money to cover.
see, that's the problem, and it's really hard to figure that out.
it
It's-
is.
I need these worksheets in front of me because it's very difficult to figure that out.
Yeah, there's
So
not.
you're
enough money.
basically saying we're forced to use the fire insurance money to cover the budget, or we have to really look hard at some drastic cuts.
What I'm saying is general fund, if we didn't put a supplemental amount in there and wanted to spend the time figuring that out and put general fund only, that this line item right here at 1.6 million, that would be absolutely allowable and not use that money. So delete that out. It would be 1.8 million being transferred, right? Into the ones that are negative that need it. So that's the concern I have.
Well, that
If
little
we-
thing, that little exercise you did on the calculating the cells just helped me.
Okay, yeah, I'll just delete that so you can see.
So what you're saying is that if we draw down our reserves, we still need 1.8 million of the insurance proceeds to clean up our other funds.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
And to take that one step further, $900 of that is the museum fund, right?
Yes.
So if you take the 900 out of that, and then that shows you really what we'd be taking in a sense.
Okay, let me delete that too then.
Sorry, I'm just trying to help you.
Oh, I think that's great.
Because
Perfect.
it's just like,
This is
so,
great.
so
Because
there,
it helps us to understand
Yep.
exactly what's happening.
right.
I'm
See, so
happy
now
to
you
do
see
that.
it's eight, now it's 805.
Hold on, let me go
It
up
was
there.
885,000,
855.
855,000.
Now you
and-
see that?
Yep.
There you go.
So, okay, this has been a very interesting exercise. I hope it was as interesting for everyone else as it was for me.
It was a little easier to understand
Yeah.
when you
Yes.
showed us that, because we're all tactile people, we have to see. So,
Perfectly fine. And I'll send everybody this Excel's budget now that we've talked about it, so you have it to review after the meeting. Does that that help?
Yes, I would
Okay.
really appreciate that. Thank
Yep,
you.
I'll do that.
Yes, thank you.
I have a
And
question.
through the week, don't go too far from your phone.
I won't. I'll be available.
Yeah.
So Patricia, if we juggle the numbers in the way that you just did, we can still essentially pass the mayor's budget as it is that right?
Yes. It would just be, we'd have a supplemental budget coming on the 22nd as well as the mayor's budget that you'll need to pass.
And that will take care of the negatives.
That'll take care of the negatives and I'll update I'll update the museum expense and cash, beginning cash.
Then we still have a really tight budget.
Yep. So
Well, I
if the
think-
goal
I
is to
think-
remove
I
general
think-
fund, I'll do that.
I think that it might, you know, I really like the idea though of the finance committee, you know, being charged with really looking at where,
Working on it.
yeah, because there are some things that we budget for the whole year that, you know, kind of get absorbed when maybe they didn't really need the money till March. And so what are some of those real numbers? I mean, I don't want to be the person that cuts the police or the fire budget in the middle of a pandemic, but I do want to know that he's got 5 positions he can't fill till April, and that's $8,500 a person that we're not going to be spending for till April,
Yeah.
you know, so.
I would also encourage you to think of that though, in that you're maybe we're padding the budget up front, but that's insurance for later in the year that we may need to draw on, rather than starting out so tight that we lose our wiggle room when we need it.
I think we're saying the same thing, Liz. I don't want to actually change the police department's budget or funding allocation, but I do want to know off to the side where that wiggle room is. I don't want to find that wiggle room at the end of the year. I want to know it's there going forward. So.
But I think
Makes
with
sense.
having a new finance director too, is, you know, Patricia's learning about us, you know, and through all this process, but she's also going to learn like maybe what the finance director maybe could work with her about, what like the showing us the actual expenses, and, you know, as far as the reports that she gives us.
Right.
You know, I'm sure she could manipulate some of those to more be what the council is asking for, you know, but she, you know, she's just learning this about us now. So we can't, you know, don't hold any of that against you, Patricia. But, you know, it's just like, oh, I see what these people want, you know, but.
Right. We can update our monthly report we give you to add a page that discusses positions being filled and whether or not they're filled that month. So then you can actually kind of see what's been happening, and that would help us kind of get an idea if the expenses came in less than what we anticipated, which is what we hope for, of course.
Of course.
And the
Yes.
flip side
And the
of that-
revenues come in higher too. That's the two things.
the flip side of that is you might have somebody that's funded for the whole year, but you know that they might be retiring in September. So there's 3 months of that position is kind of still there. So. So do any council members have anything else that they want to ask specifically of Director Soul? Seeing none, I'd like to ask our department heads, do you have anything, having listened and shared with us tonight? Are there any department heads who want to make sure we hear something from you before we go off and ponder? Oh, look, here they come.
Who do you want to talk to first?
I saw Stacy first. Director Barnum.
Yes, thank you. So my concern is, what are we going to do in 2022?
Mm-hmm.
As we enter 2022, we'll have another budget with a negative $1.6 million. And I'm not saying that, of course, I'm not saying that I don't want all of us to have everything that we need. I just hope that over the next year, the council is working on a plan for what we're going to do in 2022.
I appreciate that. And I think you said it better than I did, in the sense that that's why we got to go right back to work in January and start closing that gap.
Yeah, there won't be any more reserve money. Not only will there not be enough reserve money, but we won't be putting any money into our reserve.
Yep.
So I work in parks, and so I'm always concerned about the budget.
Well,
Thank you.
Yeah, because you got a big bunch.
Chief Shoemate.
Yes, thank you. So I'm just going to say thank you to everybody who reached out to me, and Councilwoman Ellis, as President Shaw made mention, you have asked a lot and awesome questions. And so I think as we make our way into 2021, communication as it always is key. So I would just ask, as one of the department heads, and of course, the one that I believe takes the biggest piece of the pie in the general fund. As we move through 2021, by all means, continue to communicate with me. Council President Shaw brought up an excellent question with respect to, I have 5 unfunded or unfilled positions. I will have another retirement in May, another one expected in September, and my eligibility list is not looking as promising as I had hoped. So there certainly are going to be some savings there. That is, unless we don't get some positions filled and the summer hits. And then, I always try to work on my overtime budget and trying to keep that down. But so anyway, again, thank you for the inquiries, the various questions, and keep them coming.
Thank you.
I mean, that's a great point that Deanne's brought up. We don't have to wait till the end of the year to work on our budget. Just because. So there's a saying I absolutely hate, which is that's the way we've always done it. And there's no reason we have to keep doing it that way. If the council wants to, make this an emphasis for 2021, then that's something all the committees can keep an eye on, not just finance, but all the committees can keep in their head and keep, keep the
I
pulse.
think that's a great idea.
And that we maybe look at 2-year budgeting, especially given that this 1.6 million seems to keep carrying forward, that we address it now and into next year, the following year.
We did. That was brought up 2 years ago, and it was voted down. Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can't try again.
No,
I still think
new
it's a good
council,
idea.
lots of new people.
Yeah, the new council.
Council
Yes.
President Shaw,
Yes.
I just wanted to add too that as department heads, we try to work really, really well together and really closely. And I think some of the, the funny jokes from the past that used to be that departments would wait till the end of the year and whatever they had left, we'd spend our budgets. And we're really conscious of not doing that. And we try to underspend whenever possible. And I just think that was important to say, because we do work really hard to try to keep those expenses down. And we are cognizant that we represent the citizens in the city, and we try to do our very best in that. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you.
And Council President Shaw, on the biennial budget, Councilmember Ellis, it has to start in an odd year. So it would have to be 2023. And on the concern that we would have the same level of deficit, I agree that we need to start early. Not sure January is the right time, but we've got an audit going on, but we'll do whatever council wants. But we really do need to start looking at this stuff, planning, allocations. There's a lot of ways that we're not splitting cost across the city right now that would help save the general fund. So there are ideas and ways to efficientize things. So I am very excited that we are going to do that. I think that's terrific. And I think the department heads should be involved because they know their budgets and their departments better than anybody else. So thank you. And that's all I have.
So last but not least, I was wondering if the mayor had anything to share with us tonight.
Did you get Hubbard?
Well, this has been a great,
Oh, sorry, Chief.
this has been a great meeting. You guys are awesome. Great questions. The beginning of this year, when I asked staff to look into some cuts, so we could, because of the COVID issues, they did a tremendous job of working together and coming up with some options. And I was looking through some notes the other day, and I noticed that one of them said Patricia Soul will be here to visit on Friday. That was August 6th. And so you think about it, Patricia has been here since August and had no transition whatsoever, stepped in here. And I know I've said this before, but I'm saying it again. She stepped in and took over and is learning on her own and doing a tremendous job. And so with the department heads helping and all, it's just been a tremendous team effort. And I'm very proud. But we have more things to work on.
Yeah.
It seems like we always end up towards the end of the year in a mad rush. But some years we have done better getting things going earlier. And I agree with that. That's a great idea. One thing I want to say too is that we came into this year with some budget issues and deficits that we weren't planning on, and for various reasons, certainly not all the previous mayor's fault. We thought we had a balanced budget last year, and it turned out we came into the new year with some issues. So with COVID and all, we didn't make that money up. I was hoping that our economy would be well enough to pull some of that down, but it didn't. But quite frankly, we have done really well to where we're at right now, considering everything and comparing us to the bigger cities. We're in pretty good shape. The insurance money is in the reserves. It's part of the reserves now. And you get everything cleaned up and running on balance and where it should be. We're going to tip into a little bit of that, but hopefully we can work that out and not have to do that again next year. It's been, I think we've been into the reserves last year, and I believe the last 2 or 3 years we've been using some reserves, but nothing like this year. This is a big hit on the reserves. So we had 3 union contracts of our major unions to negotiate coming into this year, and that added some expenses. But I think overall we're doing really well. We have police and fire departments trying to fill out their staff requirements. We have firefighters that are working so hard down there that it gets frustrating for them sometimes. And one of the things that I wanted the fire chief to look at was making sure that roster was filled out, and we didn't start losing firefighters because of work frustration there with their calls. So there was just a lot of things to consider this year to make things better and to make things work better, and it costs money. But I think staff has done a tremendous job of working to make things right.
Well, thank you.
I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more from our department heads? So I have one suggestion for the council, and having been at a third reading of a budget at previous sessions, it can get kind of confusing. One of the things that I would like to suggest, so that maybe we can be more clinical isn't the right word about it, but maybe it's more organized, I guess, maybe. I'd like to suggest that council members, if you have, everybody who talked had 1 or 2 things that they were looking at, maybe rather than thinking you have to bring a proposal for a budget amendment to the council, if you wanted to email me your any specific change you would like to make to the budget before it gets adopted, if you email those to me, I can prepare like a 1-pager of proposed things that we can go through at our next meeting and decide yay or nay. We want to do that, yay or nay. You know, so let's say you don't, poor Stacy, I'm going to pick on Stacy. Let's say we decide we don't need 2 new gators in the Parks Department, but we're only going to buy 1. But, you know, things like that. If we have a list and we can see it as a whole picture, we can just go through that at our meeting and decide whether those things stay in. And that's I'd like to suggest. Yes, Patrice?
Thank you, Council President Shaw. I'd just like to remind everyone that that may be interpreted as a potential electronic meeting.
So it may be interpreted as a potential, is it or isn't it? If one can,
I would say yes, it is.
So
yes, I would say.
If Tawny emails me and says, Deanne, I would, you know, I'd like to offer that we not fund blah, 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 or that something that would be a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act?
You have just requested communication from every member of City Council. And in that way, that is a discussion, an electronic discussion of topics for the legislature to understand. So I understand that you're looking at it from an informational. I was simply trying to provide a cautionary response. If you would like to do that, I would like you to consider that. But perhaps each standing committee could request that so that there would be 3 individually from within their committee rather than 1 all going forward.
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay, I'm completely confused.
So
we can't
rather than
then?
all 12 people communicating with you, Council President Shaw, perhaps the people on the Finance Committee could communicate with the Finance Chair. The people on the Public Safety Committee could communicate with the Public Safety Chair. The people on the Public Works Committee could communicate with the Public Works Chair. And that way there are 3 smaller lists that also do, however, take that into account. And that, because there would not be a quorum of individuals having an extended discussion related to the business of the legislation, none of those would be violations of the Open Public Meeting Act. As you are well aware, this is something that I have spoken of often, and I know that people get tired of hearing it. I am offering that suggestion this evening. Thank you.
I'm not, well, we'll definitely will follow our attorney's advice. Apparently I'm not allowed to communicate with you individually. So do we just not do email?
Respectfully, if it's informational and if it's not talking about a discussion that needs to be taking place if it's informational alone, if it's not an ongoing communication with a quorum of the legislators about topics for discussion in the whole, I am taking a very conservative role. And
so in the past, when somebody has emailed me and says, I'd like to do a resolution on blah, 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 and bring it to the council, what are your thoughts? And we have a give and take on that, that's against the law?
No, ma'am. If there are a quorum of people on that email chain, then yes, that's a violation of the Open Public Meeting.
I understand that.
All right.
So if anyone cares to share their thoughts about what they'd like to bring forward next week so that, that there's fewer surprises, if you want to email me individually, I think that would be allowed.
How else would I do it?
Hey, is that
just for clarification's sake, the city attorney is asking us not to CC everybody. If you have, don't send an email out to all the council members.
All right. Okay.
If you
that
want
was my
to
confusion
give
because
an
that thought
idea,
had never occurred to me.
yes. So she doesn't want just like on every email they send us, she doesn't want that reply all, so that we're having a public meeting that's not open to the public.
Yeah.
If you have a suggestion, just email Deanne directly. And then, you know, that's what I believe
Leave the
Patrice was
rest.
getting at.
Well, thank you, Connie. I think you probably said it better than I did, because I certainly didn't mean to imply that we should all be emailing and
Each other.
She was
everybody.
just, I believe she was just trying to clarify it for us to make sure that it's just one way. There we
Just
go.
don't hit the reply all.
No, don't do that. Very bad.
I totally understand, and I don't want anybody to be emailing the whole council about something we might take action on.
Yeah.
So does anyone have anything else? I really, I'm glad we did this. I think it
I
really.
am too. Thank you all for participating.
Mhm.
I think it was
So
a good-
one more thing, let me bring this up, because I don't know how time sensitive this is. Maybe Rick can fill us in a little bit. I heard at least one comment about the timber purchase. And I don't know how time sensitive that is, Rick, if that's something this council needs to think about soon.
It is not time sensitive. It could
Good.
happen. It could, if we wanted to budget for it, it's obvious we'd have to put in the budget soon. It could be a supplemental budget next year. It could, I mean, the money could be around, hopefully it's going to around for a long time. You could decide 5 years down the road to invest it in timber in our watershed. So yeah, there's, we've
Well,
been dealing with ITT Rainier, and they're not going to sell it to anybody but us.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Rick, could I follow up on that? Could we have a bond issue that would be used to pay for that property rather than take it out of our general fund?
Liz, I'm an engineer and I have no idea. You'll have to ask Patricia, because I don't know anything about the finance end of it.
Patricia, could you weigh in quickly on that?
Can quickly weigh in. I'd have to do some research for you.
Okay.
And we'd have to look at what the payment out would be, because that's not going to help cash flow. It'll reduce the amount of cash we have if we have a payment on a bond for land that's over 2 million. So
We're in,
would need to be.
we're pretty good shape for bonds. But we have talked about it a little bit in the past about saving that for police station and fire stations. And the package wouldn't be, we wouldn't use up all of our bonding ability doing that, but because we put together a fuller package of different financing sources. But I would, it just doesn't seem like a great idea to me to have a bond issue with for the timber purchase.
Yeah.
Councilman Kennedy.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in here because this is something that I brought up a couple of times. And, you know, one of the big things that we've talked about is utilizing the money that we got from the settlement wisely and making the most out of it. So taking a chunk of that and putting it towards an investment like this timberland, you know, the sooner we do it, the more that we're going to be able to get back from that investment. And it also takes part of that money and starts making it work for us rather than just sitting around waiting for it to be spent. So that's really why I had suggested that using part of that money for that purchase rather than trying to find any other source, so that it could be one of our working soldiers for us.
Thank you.
I mean, and I think it would be good if, the finance department could look at that, in January once, whether that, because maybe that's an investment thing we need to look at, but that would be, that could be something that they look at with our finance director and explore that, like, what would that look like? What would that, that kind of thing, so that we have all the information.
Right. I only brought it up because I didn't know how time sensitive the sale might be right now. So that's all.
That's a good point. And it sounds like we're not real time sensitive.
No.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. I don't see any more hands waving. With everyone's consent, I'm going to declare us adjourned. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas. See you next week.
Have a good night, everybody.
Stay healthy.
Thanks.